I'd like to see this medication off the market to protect the unborn, but also I have deep concerns about the way the FDA went about approving mifepristone 20 years ago. For the health and safety of women, I'm looking forward to this litigation continuing and holding the manufacturers of mifepristone accountable and ultimately putting the interests of women first.
Shut up, Mike Pence. Look, you know that Mike Pence is worse than any other politician in terms of being able to hide how actively he's lying to you, because he does these little things. Well, you know, we got to do this thing, and he does the fake gravitas on his voice, like, oh, I'm really thinking really hard about this. I just genuinely have a problem with the way the FDA approved mifepristone 20 years ago. Yeah, it's really concerning. Despite the fact that in 1988, France and China approved it, and 35 years later, 94 countries have approved the drug. No, you're not actually concerned, or if you were, it wouldn't be based on real concerns because those concerns do not exist. It is a drug that has been studied out the wazoo. More than 100 studies spanning continents as well as decades have examined the effectiveness and the safety of both mifepristone as well as another drug that it's often used with. All conclude that the pills are a safe method for terminating a pregnancy. But if that is not enough to reassure you, it is shockingly safer than some very commonly used drugs, including penicillin as well as Viagra. I'm sure Mike Pence is familiar with at least one of those, assuming he's had an infection and needs to treat it with penicillin. Mifepristone is associated with 5 deaths per million users. Penicillin 4 times deadlier. Viagra 10 times deadlier than this drug that he's just very concerned about. And I think, well, we might have to take it off the market. Yeah, you gonna take penicillin and the blue pill off too, buddy? Jared, what do you think?
Well, again, Mike Pence talking about old stuff from 20 years ago. He says he's got issues with how the FDA approved mifepristone. I always say it wrong. 20 years ago, Mike Pence is annoyed with how the FDA approved this drug 20 years ago. He's not concerned about what MAGA was chanting to hang his ass outside of the Capitol 2 years ago, but 20 years ago, he's concerned about it. Why weren't you concerned about it in 2004? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, all the way up to 2023, because he wasn't told to have an issue with how it was approved 20 years ago until this year, because it's all politics. These questions are what they are banking on people not asking. Really, 20 years ago, Mike? That's what you're concerned with right now? How come you weren't concerned with it before? How many people died of this pill over the last 20 years when you were no longer concerned about it? That sounds like incompetence. So you've had this up your sleeve for 20 years, Mike, and you haven't had anything to say about it until right now? That sounds like that disqualifies you from leading this country. What if something else happens? Hey, COVID happened when you were vice president. You guys weren't prepared for that either. And in fact, once you had the opportunity to be prepared for it, you still didn't do anything. So you've shown this track record of not caring about things, apparently, in your words, that harm so many people over 20 years. When are you gonna finally catch up? Sounds like someone else should be in office, Mike.
Look, I wanna point out Ukami's great comment. Well, Viagra is gender affirming, so Mikey should be behind it and take it off the market too. That's a great comment. By the way, Ukami, do you already have a Blueprint gift card? Because if not, rewards@tyt.com, send an email. I love that comment. But anyway, oh, and by the way, look, I understand rhetorically, sometimes we contrast these things. I personally don't want to be an active part of this, an active participant in aiding the stigma of something that, for not just the men. Bear in mind, when a man uses Viagra, it's the partner that benefits too. Many of them, in many cases, not being men. There are people with psychological problems as well as physical ailments that mean that it needs to be used. But it is, I think, great to point out how much more dangerous it is. And used in less countries, used for less time, and yet he doesn't have a problem with it. It is, as JR pointed out, they're just looking for things to ban. That's what it is. And very, very specifically, looking for things to ban that allows them to effectively outlaw abortion outside of the states where they have control. They can do it in the states where they have control, but they're not satisfied with that. They want way more democratic states to also not have those rights, the people living in them. And again, I will remind you, this is going to be a theme of the show. There used to be a time when they pretended to care about freedom. They don't even pretend anymore. They're delivering for their base by taking away the rights of the people that their base have been convinced to hate and fear and be jealous of. That's what it is.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.